Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. This is the fourth in the series of webinars where we're focusing on leading women within the commodity trading, shipping, and trade finance space. We're just waiting while we have a number of people logging into the webinar, and we're expecting quite a few people logged on today, and certainly with three such distinguished panelists, it should be a very interesting discussion. And as I said, this is the fourth webinar in this series. In the previous three, we've been looking at a number of different angles. And so we start off the first one looking very much at people's personal experiences. In the second, we were looking at regulations and figures. And in this particular webinar, we're going to be talking about a number of different subjects, but we're talking to three people who are joining us from what we would consider to be the cutting edge of the trading world. This is really trying to drag the commodity trading world kicking and screaming into the 21st century, which I'm a big fan of. And so we're just waiting as we have people logging in. We've got 20 people online already, and so we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so while other people log in, and then we'll get kicked in off with the webinar and the full discussion. So I think it's a good time to get started in earnest. As I said, welcome to this webinar. Great to have you all with us today, and this is the fourth in the series. We're looking at the important subject of leading women within the commodity trading, shipping, and trade finance sector. It is a sector which is historically very underrepresented in terms of women. The gender balance has always been very skewed. This is something that is in the process of changing, probably not changing as fast as it should do, but as we've heard in previous webinars, this is also an issue in many different industries, and so it's not contained purely to the commodity trading industry, but certainly the commodity trading industry is certainly not leading the way. I am joined today by three very interesting panelists who are joining me from three companies which, as I said, are very much at the cutting edge of the commodity trading world. And as they can all three do a much better job of introducing themselves than I can, I'm going to start off by asking them each to introduce themselves. I'm going to start off with Petya, who's here joining us from Covantis. And so, Petya, if you could please tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Richard. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel alongside Stephanie and Natalia. Very pleased to discuss such an important topic as enabling women to evolve and grow successfully in the commodity trading industry. So, introduce myself. I'll try to keep it short. Petya Sechanova, based in Switzerland, in Geneva. I'm the CEO of Covantis. I'm absolutely sure no one has heard what Covantis is about, so I'll take a few minutes to explain. I've been in that role for a bit more than a year and a half, actually, since Covantis was also set up as an independent legal entity. But prior joining, I spent my career in different fields, industries in different 5 or 6 different countries. Probably most of the time I have professionally been engaged is with Cargill, where I spent 11 years in Cargill in various roles, in various locations, lastly being responsible for the global trade operations teams of Cargill agricultural supply chain. So very much linked to the commodity trading industry, which I consider as my home base and very close to my heart. Now, just to say a few words what Covantis is about, because probably for most of the people in that forum, it's something that they hear for first time. Covantis is a tech startup, a digital startup, which actually has been set up by a number of commodity trading and shipping companies, such as Cargill, but also others, such as Bunge, ADM, Komgo, Louis Dreyfus, and Viterra. Before joining as a CEO, I have been actually involved in the project when it was still a project, a concept. And as I mentioned, it's a digital tech startup, aims to improve the way we execute, we operate our bulk commodity processes, mainly when we ship them in the commodities internationally. So what we are focusing first is to create a digital platform that will connect the buyers and the seller in the shipping process for the execution of agricultural commodities, and obviously aims to bring more efficiencies, less risk and costs to what we know are very, very manual, archaic and old-fashioned processes today. So that's about me.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today, and also to hear what you're doing with Covantis. It's interesting because for many years, the old saying in trading used to be that you make your money in trading and you lose it in operations. Hence, that's really where you can lose a lot of money if you're not careful. And so I think a lot of the future focus of trading is very much looking at the operational flow, looking at how we actually manage the day-to-day working of the trading world. And I think there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of advances to be made. And I think it's very positive that that's being done. So looking forward to discussing with you in a minute. But now I'm going to move on to Stephanie. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thank you very much, Richard. And very impressed by the career of Petya. So I'm looking forward to hearing Natalia as well. So I'm Stephanie Trabia. I'm currently the CCO of VAKT. VAKT is a new technology startup as well, and we are covering very much what Petya has described before. So we are trying to, in fact, we are bringing efficiency and security to all the post-trade management processes, currently on the oil markets. And we've been live for 3 years. And yeah, our users are mainly contract people, back office, middle office users, and inspectors as well, terminals, etc. So if you want to know more, go on our website and or call me and I will explain. Now it's about women. So let's speak about my career. And who I am. So I'm a mother of 2. My kids are at university, so they are, not kids anymore. And I'm based in Geneva. I've started my career 25 years ago. I have a mathematical background. So I've started as in the research department at ELF Trading. At the time, it was ELF, it was not TOTSA, and moved to the derivatives trading desk, where I stayed for a few years. Then I moved to Singapore. Then coming back to London, I had the pleasure and the opportunity to start with ICE. At the time, it was not the big company it is today. It was very much a blue chip company. And so I started at ICE. I was the only employee, and we set up the team and became the CEO of ICE UK Limited, bought the IP, the exchange, the oil exchange, converted the pit trading to screen trading. Then I moved and I went to a brokerage company based in London still. And so I set up a brokerage desk on the derivatives market, still related to oil. And then I went and took a year off with my family, where I traveled around the world, and then came back to Geneva, where I set up my own consulting company, and still in the energy business. Then I took 2 or 3 years where I basically completely changed my career and decided to become a yoga teacher. So I taught yoga for 2-3 years, and then I came back and very interested in all the changes and new technologies that we could see emerging in the energy market. So that's where I joined VAKT about 2 years and a half ago, and that's where I am today.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Delighted to have you with us, and very much looking forward to discussing on a number of those topics that you just mentioned in a moment. But before we do that, I'd like to move on to Natalia, if you could kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to hear Stephanie's and Petya's CVs and to see that the fintech industry is attracting such enormous experience, on the operations side. And Stephanie, I didn't know about the yoga background. That's very, very, very cool to know. So myself, Natalia Casiano, I'm a sales lead in Komgo. I'm calling out of Komgo's London office. You can see a bit of light behind me, but don't be misled. The weather is horrific in London today. So for those of you who don't know us, Komgo is a software development and IT services company, and we offer digital network and workflow solutions for the trade finance industry. What it means is that our client base includes both corporates and banks, and we are solving inefficiencies in trade finance flows by enabling more secure and more structured communications between counterparties. We're owned by a consortium of banking corporates. We have 22 industrial shareholders now, and we have over 250 clients across the globe. So, about my background, I was born in Russia. I lived most of my professional life in the Netherlands, and I worked for ABN AMRO in Amsterdam and in Brazil, and most recently for Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi, what is now called MUFG in London, always in commodity trade finance, with a special heart to agri-commodities, since I covered agri most of the time. And it may be interesting to mention that I actually changed jobs during the pandemic. So I took a decision to leave the corporate banking life and join a fintech to try myself in a different environment. That happened in the midst of the pandemic. So all my sales efforts have been taken remotely from home. And one of the items we're going to talk, of course, is about networking and how hard it is to network online. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Natalia. To be honest, I would be honored to have any one of you three on a discussion like this. To have all three of you is very, very, very much an honor. Just very quickly to introduce myself, my name is Richard Watts. I'm founder of HR Maritime and the president of the Propeller Club here in Geneva. So this webinar is being organized by the CTA, the Commodities Trading Association, and is very much focusing on leading women within the commodity trading, shipping, and trade finance industry. There are a number of different subjects that I'd like to go on and discuss quite a lot in detail. Before we go on to that, we've had a lot of different discussions in the last 3 webinars, and there was an interesting discussion about unconscious bias. And in fact, at the suggestion of one of the participants, it was Yasmina, I ended up actually taking a test on the Harvard website where you can take a test for your unconscious bias, which I would strongly push anyone to do. Otherwise, it can end up being a very complicated discussion, certainly around gender. It's a discussion that I'd say a lot of people in the industry or in business are quite ill-equipped to really have a good discussion about and to have an open discussion. And I think, as with most things, it's the type of discussion that very much benefits from being brought out in the open and actually being discussed openly, instead of people taking their positions and just making assumptions. We've had interesting discussions about maternity leave, also about paternity leave, and how this can have an effect on the situation. One thing that was brought up in the past was the importance of role models, and so basically female role models. And it's very, very, very enjoyable having the 3 of you here on this panel, because I feel that, you know, telling your background, telling what you've been doing so far and what you're doing today provides very, very interesting female role models. And certainly I think for a lot of the attendees that would be an interesting point. Basically, this just a couple of points before we do get kicked off with the questions. This webinar is being recorded, and so it will be available later on. It will be published on LinkedIn, so you'll be able to catch up on any points that you didn't hear in full at the time. There's a chat function, so if you have questions, then please do not hesitate to ask those questions on the chat, and during the course of the discussion we will take the opportunity to look at those questions and bring them into our discussions. We'd very much like to hear what you have as questions for these wonderful panelists, and also we'll have 3 poll questions because we'd like to hear from the participants, for the attendees to this webinar. And on that note, I'd actually like to kick off with the first of the poll questions. And so for Christoph, who's running the webinar, if I could ask him to bring up the first poll question on the screen. So the question is, during my career, I have experienced significant issues linked to gender. these questions are not designed to be answered only by women, only by men. The point of the questions is to be answered by everybody who's listening. So I would invite you to put in your answer and say what is, what your answer would be, and then we can move on to the next question. Unfortunately, the host and the panelists are not actually allowed to vote, which I'm sure that the three panelists are sitting there feeling very frustrated. But it'd be interesting to see what the answers from the attendees later on. So otherwise, basically, we're going to kick off and talk straight away about some of the subjects that we are here to really dive into. And so first of all, I'd like to turn to you, Petya. In some of the discussions that we had before we were in the introductory conversation, we were talking about the importance and the benefits of diversity within a company, and how, you do pay a lot of attention trying to make sure the staff is diverse. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and just tell me what that means to you and how you manage it on a day-to-day basis?
Well, Richard, I was the one very disappointed because I was just about to select my answer in the first poll question when I saw that host and panelists cannot vote. So unfortunately, I'm very curious to see the results at the end of this panel. But let me share a little bit my thoughts. And I can share my experience, which is pretty new, recent, and I'll be honest, and I want to be humble about it. It's my first role being a CEO of a company. So I have to learn a lot, and I'm still learning a lot, and still a lot of things that I don't know, and very little that I know. But I think one thing that I've absolutely underestimated at the beginning is we very often preach that diversity drives innovation and enhance productivity, but I'm not sure to what extent people believe in it. So at the beginning, when we were setting up Covantis, it started as a project. We created a dedicated team, and actually every single team member was coming from the industry. They were coming from the commodity trading and shipping industry because this was our founding members were commodity trading and shipping companies. So everybody had a specific competence and role: operations, IT, commercial, which was my area of expertise, project management, but we all came from the same industry. And one of the key focuses when we were branding and promoting ourselves was for the industry and by the industry. That's great. So we were very proud of ourselves that we know the industry, we are experts, we know it all, so we'll do it. And then when we created that independent structure, legal entity, obviously one of my first tasks as a CEO, together with my management team, those of them that were already transitioned and part of the entity, was to recruit the rest of the team. And here we spend a lot of time, and actually I realized that if we all realize that if we don't bring the outside in, if we don't diversify and bring different perspectives, different people that have nothing to do with commodity trading and shipping, we'll have very little chance to succeed. Yes, we know, obviously, the commodity trading and shipping industry. We know who are the clients that we target. We know what are the processes. But we realized very quick that we are not experts in a lot of areas that we try Covantis to become. We don't know how to make a digital startup succeed. We don't know how to create a digital network. We don't know how to commercialize it. We don't know how to create valuable, viable, usable, and feasible products, which is the core aspects of product management today. And we don't know it. All we know is how to trade and ship and execute. And I also think that being an expert, or what we very often say SME, is sometimes not enough, and it's biasing, and it can even be harmful because you have these biases which are inherited, you are very strongly opinionated, you know how the work has been done, and you think that you know what it takes for it to be improved. But very often you only look for optimizing it, and you don't take it a step further where you can challenge its existence. Can this process be removed? What will happen if we don't do it anymore? Transform, completely change it. And this is where we said, actually, we should be focusing really on bringing that outside perspective. And in a lot of the recruitments that we've done in the past and we are still doing, we are actually looking for people that are completely open-minded, completely different backgrounds, maybe nothing to do with tech, digital, or nothing even to do with commodity shipping and trading. And I'll give just 2 examples to make it more specific. For example, at the beginning, our belief was that product owners, they need to know the business inside out. And that's true, partly, but not unnecessarily requirement or requisite. We have some product owners that come from the industry. They have experience in banking, in digital tech startups, but they don't know operations and they don't know how agri-commodities are executed. Or we have an area in our business which is focused on user research. And this is very much around what the users want and what is their behavior with the digital tech startups. And then we will say, okay, you need to know commodity shipping in order to do user research. And no, some of our users researchers have nothing to do with this industry. They come from backgrounds such as anthropology, which is about human behaviors, what is natural to them, and not even digital. And I think that brings a lot of great discussions, that diversity. Obviously, it changes the perspective, it drives innovation, and I see it, you bring different perspective that is really, really interesting. And I'm really happy to promote that element. And for us, it's really, really important topic going forward.
Excellent. Well, I mean, it's fascinating what you're saying, and certainly from what I take away is the importance of diversity at every level and the importance of different points of view. And it's interesting because we do find it's the easiest just to hire someone who's a mirror of yourself. That person won't challenge you. That person won't necessarily threaten you. And so it's the importance of just actually going outside of the box, let's say. Maybe it's also that we have a lot of fundamental assumptions within our industry that possibly when someone comes from outside, they actually challenge those assumptions. And some of them, when you're actually challenged, you're like, well, actually, why do we all do things this way? And it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense. Natalia, I'd like to bring this over to you because, I mean, Komgo's been in existence for quite a while. Do you find the same kind of challenges? Are you also trying to bring in people from different areas of life? And how does this affect the gender diversity as well within the teams?
I think it's a subject of diversity of thought, what Petya is saying. It's not always gender specific. Komgo started as a group of, if you wish, ex-commodity bankers. I myself still have commodity banking background, but we have people in our organization who, due to a different background and different skill set, are able to elevate themselves from the commodity finance day to day. And what you're fairly saying, Richard, they're able to challenge the ways of working. We, all 3 of us as companies, are here to challenge existing ways of working. So this conversation, that brainstorming with the people who don't come from industry and who can bring a different perspective or a different sales angle, it's always very fruitful and allows us to develop new strategies of how acquire new markets or develop our products in the most efficient way.
Certainly makes an awful lot of sense what you're saying, and it would be nice, I think, if more companies adhere to this. I'd like to explore this a little bit further, but I think actually, we do have time constraints, and so we're going to be moving on. There's a question I'd like to bring over towards Stephanie, but before I do that, I'd like to actually bring up the results from the poll question that we just had, and then we'll go on to the second poll question as well. So if Christoph can bring up the results from that first poll question, be interested to see. Okay, so certainly, a quarter agree with strongly agree, a quarter agree with moderately agree, and a quarter with neither agree or disagree. but the minority have never experienced any significant issues linked to gender. And so it's quite an interesting answer, because in fact it leads me on to a little bit what I want to talk about with Stephanie in a second. But before we do get onto that, we're going to close down the answer to that poll, and then we're just going to bring up the next question poll and have your answers. So in my company, I think there is less opportunity for women to be promoted. And so again, this is not something where we're looking for only men to answer, only women to answer. I'd like to have the point of view of all the audience. And so please put your answer there. Again, I apologize to the panelists that you cannot. It feels like it's very disempowering to not allow you to be answering there. But in that case, we were having some discussions during our introductory chats that we've had earlier this week and end of last week. And certainly, I mean, times are changing quite rapidly at the moment, and certainly in terms of gender equality and essentially the opportunities for women within the working space. And I'd just like to, in fact, Stephanie, was related to some of the conversations that we had and how you're seeing at the moment things are changing and the actual present day, whether it's really representative of a lot of the image that we have of these issues.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I do believe that our society has changed a lot. You know, from a few years ago, you know, you have now a different perception, I think, and we are slowly moving away from these stereotypes of a woman is at home looking, you know, after her kids and taking care of the house. A man is going to work to basically make sure that his family has everything it needs. Then stereotype of, as well, of women not working being silly, of men, you know, looking after their kids not being real men. So I think that we are really moving away from these stereotypes, and I'm glad to see that. And I think it's mainly linked to the education. I think it all starts with kids. And if you look at, you know, long time ago, you know, not long time ago, in fact, a few years ago, the books which were read at school, or the stories which were read at school, were always presenting a family where the woman was at home, the man was working. The best kind of status for the woman was like to be a nurse. Okay, that was a few years ago. So that's the way, that's what you teach your kids. That's what the society teach for kids. That's what, you know, that's kind of the stereotypes. I think it has changed. And now it's moving away from, you know, women at home, men at work. The other thing that has changed is also education at home, because obviously we have more and more women working. We have, as such, you know, the role model at home is changing. So as a kid, I was lucky to have my mom working, and I never suffered from the fact that my mom was working. So it drove me to think, okay, then I could work first, be happy working, have kids, and still be happy. So I think obviously what's happening with this change of more and more women working is helping, you know, with the young generation, the new generation. So school for me, very important. Education at home, obviously, very important. Media as well. Because, you know, thinking about, again, when I was a kid, you know, I was watching the TV series, again, same stereotype. Man was working, woman was at home. So now it has changed completely. On TV series, you even have men looking after kids, like being the childcare. And I think it's great. And, you know, we have now Marvel coming with all the superheroes being not only men, but women. So all of these really helps, you know, with the mindset of kids growing up and thinking differently and moving away from these stereotypes we used to have in the past. Now, obviously, there are still things to be done, and I think, you know, we can see that we have more and more figures, female figures, not only in the industries but also in politics. I mean, Christine Lagarde is, you know, is kind of, you know, the boss, like the president of the European central bank, and we have obviously Angela Merkel. We have, and I was looking at the Fortune 500 magazine ranking, the biggest American companies, and this year we have 41 women being CEO of these companies, when 10 years ago we had 12. So okay, it can evolve even better, but even more. But I think that we've done tremendous progresses, and I'm glad for that. So what can we do to continue? I think we can definitely continue in education at school, and making sure that we don't have any differentiation about a girl or a boy. You want to play football, you can. You're a girl, you can. You want to dance, you're a boy, you can. So that again, starting from a young age. And then also, when for adults, obviously for women in a company, then allowing them to take maternity leave, to potentially work part-time, and to, I would say, lower probably the childcare cost as well, because a lot of time women stop working because their salary doesn't cover the childcare cost. So I think all these things could be improved, but again, I think that we have made a lot of progresses. We can still improve, but a lot of progresses have been made, and it's great. So I don't know if I answered your question, but in my view, a lot of progresses have been made, and I think that when we speak about gender equality, I think around the world, men are not equal, women are not equal, and women are not equal to men. So I think it's as long as you believe in it, you believe that you have the right to do it, you believe that you can do it, then you will do it. And I think that's why the education is very important, because it's in you. And that's my view, basically.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And I think it's really interesting what you're talking about, and it brings quite a few things to mind. I mean, on one side, there is the fact that the figures do speak for themselves in terms of women in leadership positions, and I'm not sure if it's still the case, but I remember hearing not too long ago that there were more CEOs called David than female CEOs, which is just one of those shocking things. But at the same time, it's also, as you say, it can be a bit of a disconnect from the world that we actually live in, and certainly these generalizations can be very, very difficult. And I find they can actually make the conversation much more difficult, because it can actually be quite insulting, certainly quite insulting from a man's point of view, basically being lumped into categories. And I mean, a good example for me is when a father is looking after the kids and someone says, "Oh, you're babysitting." Well, no, I'm looking after my kids. It's called being a dad. It's not babysitting. I'm not getting paid for this. And so it's also something that we have society pressure. We have, a year ago, I ended up getting separated from my wife, and I got comments from friends saying, "Oh, are you still going to get to see the kids?" And so, yes, I get to see them 50% of the time. It's called being a dad. And these are all things that's kind of, there's almost a bit of a disconnect between what we see in the society and what we see at the moment. I'd like to bring the conversation over actually to, and we're going to have to move forward with the time as well. But Natalia, when we were talking during some of the intro discussions, I mean, first of all, you mentioned that you grew up in Russia, and so it's potentially quite a different environment for a lot of these discussions, and I think you mentioned that people are interested in what you're doing now. If you don't mind me dragging up a conversation that we had before, would you mind elaborating a little bit?
To all the Eastern European listeners, I wonder if you're going to relate to that story. So several years ago, I went back to Russia. I had to do some administrative arrangements with my documents. And as I've been waiting, I went to my school and I met the teachers who taught me back in my school. And none of them asked what I'm doing now for a living or what my profession is. The main question I've been asked if I'm married and if I have children. And the answer being no has been a great disappointment to my counterparts. So at that stage, also early in my career, it basically showed me where my value lies. And I'm sure that maybe it's cross-cultural, of course, but I'm sure that many women, many professional women, they're facing this kind of stereotyping. But Richard, what I want also to add to Stephanie's comments about female CEOs, I came by a very interesting study from Queen's Mary University of London, which is called Claiming the Corner Office. So it's a study on female CEOs, and it brings up a fantastic concept of gynandrous leadership. So it talks about the fact that you are CEO, not despite the fact that you're a woman, you're a CEO, but you're a CEO thanks to the fact that you're a woman. And it does go into some stereotypes, of course, of certain behaviors which women exhibit, of the way we're being brought up. But it talks about the fact that the young generation, the millennials and the generations after them, they respond better to the leadership styles which carry traditional female behaviors of empathy, of listening, of being emotionally open. So maybe it is one of the mix of the explanations why we see now more and more female CEOs, because of our upbringing, perhaps, are sometimes better positioned to get a response from the new workforce, from the new audience.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm in the process of reading the book, The World for Sale, which I would certainly recommend to anybody who's interested in commodity world. And the management structures of a lot of the early commodity trading companies was not remotely in line with what you were just describing. I'd like to move on to talk a little bit about flexibility and how COVID has changed our way of working. Before we do that, I'd like to bring up the last, the second poll results on the screen to see what kind of answers we got, and then we'll also go on to and put the third poll. So, in my company, I think there are less opportunities for women to be promoted. And interestingly enough, I mean, quite a broad response. It is interesting that 20%, well, I guess almost 40% are on the agree side, and almost 50% exactly on disagree side. So it certainly means that the majority do have an opinion one way or the other. But it might also represent a little bit the different types of companies that people work for, the different management structures, and the different origins of those companies. So we're going to put the results away for the moment, and then we're going to bring up the third of the poll questions. And if we can bring that up on the screen, then we have, in my company, there is a strong mentorship program for people to identify and implement steps for improvement. So if you can put your answer there, again, apologies to the panelists, but if you can put your answer there, and we'll look at the answers a little bit later. Obviously, we are, as always, getting tight for time. The problem with these webinars is we always have not enough time to discuss everything we want to. But before we do close up, Natalia, I want to talk about flexibility, and this is also something that Petya, I want to bring in some of your thoughts on as well. Flexibility, the changes of flexibility that we've seen because of COVID, and how this is potentially changing the gender balance.
If I may, I want to take a little bit of a scandalous stance on this, on flexibility. Please. I understand when we speak about working from home, balancing life and work, it's all great, and we all benefited tremendously from it during the pandemic. But I think we have part of the population being completely left out, and it's the youth. That's the graduates who are starting their professional careers, who are graduating from the uni and excited to go into the corporate world or banking world, and then they're left in front of their screen in their room, in the apartment which we share with 4 other people. This is a very challenging moment. This is a moment where the young graduate, the young professional, absorbs information the most and starts building their network. And I think people had to get really creative to achieve the growth and to be visible in the industry. Unfortunately, the way the organizations continue to be structured nowadays, to be promoted, you have to be visible. And it's very difficult to be visible when you are locked at home in lockdown 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So I can give an example of my own. During the pandemic, I joined a wonderful organization in the UK called Women in Banking and Finance. And it's networking and career progression and development organization for women in the industry. They do a tremendous job online and now also live. They match female talent with the mentors. I myself have a fantastic mentor who is very high in the banking world. And it's been very useful for me to continue building my network, even though I wasn't able to do it face to face.
Excellent. I mean, thank you very much. You also, during that, touched on two other points that I wanted to bring up at some point, which is talking about mentorship, but also talking about the importance of networking. Now, just kind of staying on the same focus of this, but Petya, I'd like to bring this over to you and just ask, how do you manage to, because obviously you have to promote interaction with your client. You've got a team of people who are either trying to be in constant contact with clients, but at the same time, with the difficulties of being able to meet in person and also the flexibility of working from home, how have you managed this over the last year or so?
I just want to echo a little bit to what Natalia said, because I don't think that it was controversial or unpopular as she thought. I totally agree with what she shared. I really think that the pandemic situation, it's a two-edged knife. It brought a certain level of realization that people can work flexibly from home and can deliver and can perform. And I think allowed many companies that previously were not allowing this to change their mind and their view and to see the results, but it also had a lot of impacts, specifically to Natalia's point on youngsters and on the new starters. So I actually agree with her. It's like with everything, it has pluses, it has minuses. One of the areas that for me is still, and I personally try to figure it out. I don't have the answer, but I find networking so much different than previously. Maybe because in my past 10 years, I spent my time in Geneva, which is a very close society in the sense that everybody knows each other. We used to see each other in some networking events organized by the different companies. And use it as an opportunity to meet other people, to keep your network alive. And it was sort of easy, natural, and you didn't have to put a lot of effort. Now you have to put a lot of effort, and you have to change a lot your approach, and you have to be so much more proactive. Even before you knew that you have to be proactive and you have to have a clear vision why you have this network, what you want to achieve, where you want to go. But somehow things were coming up a lot naturally. And now I think, and I don't have all the answers. I'm still trying to figure out what is the best way. I can openly tell you, I'm just fed up with virtual Zooms and drinks and cocktails and parties virtual. I want to meet people. I know that I need to work a lot more harder on building that network and keeping it alive and there and expanding that I had to use and do it before. And I think we probably, that's even something that you can consider. I know we are running out of time for one of the next webinars, because I think there will be ways that we'll be learning and we probably still didn't discover. But it's a whole topic that we have to probably worth spending time on, how you build and keep your network alive when so many of us are working in a virtual setting.
Well, thank you very much. And I think that I fully agree with you. I mean, networking for many people in the industry was essentially given to them on a platter before. It was all organized for them and it wasn't something they had to be actively involved in. I would almost go so far as to say that also describes a lot of people's career progression within the industry. I mean, within commodity trading in Geneva over the last 20 years, there was a lot of periods where there was a lot of demand for people. And so people were just moving from job to job without actually planning out their career, without actually consciously thinking about what they were going to be doing next. And there are a lot of people who are now in suddenly a situation where, well, actually, I've got to think of this myself. I've got to actually do it for myself. And so I think it's interesting. I mean, as far as networking is concerned, it's just a question of actually reaching out to people. I know it's easier said than done, but don't be scared. What is the worst that can happen? I mean, if you reach out to someone and they don't answer, you're in exactly the same situation as you were when you didn't reach out to them. So there's no difference there. Unfortunately, we are going to have to bring this discussion to an end. I could probably continue discussing for another hour or so very, very easily, certainly with the different topics that we've already covered and what I'd like to cover. I'd like to bring up the last poll response on the screen. And so if Christoph can bring that up. Okay, so that's quite interesting actually, because I wasn't expecting there were that many mentorship programs which are in place. I think it very much depends on the size of the company, or on the organization of the company, maybe on the maturity of the company, I guess. It's something that certainly within the Propeller Club and in collaboration with the CTA, we've been trying to promote a mentorship program and match up people, younger people who are looking for some kind of guidance for mentorship with people who have an established network and have the knowledge, and trying to bring those together and seeing how we can, share some of this network, share some of this knowledge, and give some of this guidance. And if people are interested in that, then they can contact CTA for more information. But I certainly think it's something that benefits absolutely everyone to be in a mentorship program, and as long as you have a good mentor, obviously, and there has to be, you have to also be a good mentee. It has to come from both sides. Unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of the discussion. There is a question that just popped up. Someone would like to hear the panelists' view on challenges facing women trying to re-enter the commodity industry after maternity break and how to navigate themselves into it. I'm not going to give you much time, but if you do have a 1 or 2 minute answer, any of you that you'd like to add, then I'd be very, very curious to hear your thoughts. Stephanie, I guess after working as a yoga teacher for 2 or 3 years, coming back into the industry, it's not the same, but at the same time, it is coming back into the industry. Would any three of you like to? Stephanie, you've taken yourself off mute, so I'm going to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, basically network. I would say that obviously when you left the market for a few years and you want to come back, then the first thing you should do is really to contact the people you've been working with in the past. And yeah, that's what I did. And that's where I would start. But, and potentially, look around and see if there's any training program to basically, that you could attend, or, or a seminar, or, and again, with the idea of networking with people and meeting with people. So I would say
network. The one thing I'd probably add to that is don't wait until you need people to contact them. Stay in contact with people and be in contact with them, and whenever you can, help people, help anyone around you, because it does come back. You might think, oh, what's the point? It doesn't. It does, and people remember when you help them. So no, very much agree with your comments there, Stephanie. Petya and Natalia, any comments on that before we do bring it to a close? I think we've covered nearly everything. On that note, I would like to say a huge thank you to all three of you for your excellent comments and for participating here today. And it's a pleasure for me to be talking to all three of you. And thank you all for listening to this webinar. It will be available in a video version on LinkedIn shortly. And we'll also be organizing more webinars coming up. And in fact, there will be a live event towards the end of the year where we will also be exploring similar discussions and topics. And so thank you again, all three of you, for joining me. And thank you to the attendees and for CTA to organizing this, and wishing you all a very, very nice end of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks.
Looking
Have a good
forward
day.
to meet you.
Bye.